Welcome to the America First panel. Just a bunch of Is it time? Is it 6? 7? I mean, is it past 7? We good? Yes? Cool, cool. So, a long time ago, also known as 2008, ADV Films, RIP, got handed this property called Ghost Stories. And the legend has it, I really don't know the true skinny on this origin story, but I think this is what happened. There was a children's sort of Scooby-Doo kind of show in Japan, and when ADV licensed it, the Japanese company told them something to the effect of, we're not sure it's going to sell as well or translate as well in dub form. We don't know that it's going to be a big hit in dub form in America. So, given that, you guys can kind of do what you want with the dub, as long as you keep the names the same, keep the historical ghosts the same, and keep the basic spine of the plot the same. You can do whatever you want. And so the ADR scriptwriter and Stephen Foster, and director Stephen Foster was like, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to do. And he cast 5 of us, and then the rest down the line, but he knew we would be demented and messed up enough to help him create this monster that became the Ghost Stories dub. And so there's a lot of questions people tend to have about this dub and how it got made, the dubbing process. There's also a lot of mythology that I've read online about how it got made. So I just find it so funny that it has an enduring fan base after all these years. Honestly, when we were recording it, we didn't think anybody was going to watch it. We thought maybe 500 people would see it. And lo and behold, there are people who don't watch anime at all, who know a lot about the Ghost Story stuff, which is very surreal and strange. After 23 years in the business and having worked on some pretty iconic titles, sometimes I literally once had someone say to me, I know you have a huge body of work, but I only care about ghost stories. I was like, that is an extreme statement, and I hate you, but I love you for saying it. So, with that said, I've done a few ghost story-centric panels, and I always when a con wants a couple of panels, they want like specific subjects, I usually offer this one up because people usually tend to have a lot of curiosity and a lot of questions. So, with that in mind, if you have any questions about the Ghost Stories dub, feel free to ask, and I will answer. Already, we're up to it. Well, okay, I was going to say something, but I'm not going to. I will censor myself.
Oh, thank
so
you.
Close.
Thank you. This feels a lot better than I would do scratch over like
Sure,
this.
sure. Well, it all depends on what kind of a Friday night it is. But yeah.
So, my question is, how much fun did everybody have making or dubbing the ghost stories? You know, yelling all those stuff into the mic and making fun of other actors' careers.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for everyone else, except I kind of can because we've all talked about it. But I had a lot of fun. I think there is a myth, though, that we just kind of did whatever we wanted and said whatever we wanted. But there's a couple of things wrong with that. First of all, it's not true. B of all, you could not do that when you're dubbing anime because you have to match lip flaps, for one thing. And we did have certain restrictions put on us. They were mild, as you can tell, but we did have certain restrictions. And so, like, one of the things was we did have to stick to the spine of the original story. So, believe it or not, there was actually a lot of time and care and effort put into the creation of that dub. It was pretty meticulously written. The reason it has a sort of feeling, I think, of being a little unhinged and chaotic, because it is, but Stephen Foster every now and then would let us put in our own jokes. And if he thought they were funny, and if they fit the lip flaps, he would keep them in. That's why we're all credited as being the writers. I don't know where the rumor came from that we ad-libbed the dub. That's impossible. But that would never happen. But it was chaotic, and we did throw every offensive thing except the kitchen sink like at that dub, and that's true. It was really fun. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of laughter, and like a lot of just whenever you would go in for your session, there was just always this air of ridiculousness with Stephen Foster at the helm because he's already like a bit of a, we'll say, rebel. He already had a reputation as playing fast and loose with dub scripts anyway, so he was the perfect person to direct that show. I had a great time with it. I know Monica Rial did because one day I was on my way to another session for another show and I passed by the studio where Ghost Stories was being dubbed and I saw Monica with a giant King James Bible and I was like, oh my god, is lightning about to strike this building? And she was like, shut up, I'm researching. So and she was looking for, you know, of course, biblical quotes to throw in as that character that would turn into a religious fanatic. But seeing Monica with a King James Bible was quite anachronistic, I must say. Actually, any of us in those days with a Bible was very strange. Not disparaging anyone involved in the dub, I'm just saying. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Short answer, I'm too late. I gave you the long answer. But the Cliff Notes version is, it was a lot of fun. It was some of the most fun I've ever had doing a dub, probably. Well, I don't know. I always enjoy my work, but that one was particularly crazy. Yes, you right there. Oh, you have one too? Yeah, we'll come to you next.
So, especially considering the fact that this ended up being more popular, for lack of a better word, than you expected it to be, have you personally watched through all of Ghost Stories after having made it?
I've never sat down and watched every episode. But I didn't feel it was necessary because Hajime is so much featured throughout that I felt like during the recording process, I got to experience most of the show. Now, that being said, there are certain episodes I have watched many times over. There's two that I like to watch in particular. One is we'll call it the track and field episode. And the other one we will call the bunny rabbit. Both two of my favorite episodes. And I think Brittany Karpowski's work in the bunny rabbit episode was chef's kiss. Yes.
Okay, good enough. Can you hear?
You're gonna make it happen. It's gonna be great.
Alright, so basically I've heard many different rumors about how it came about, but I've heard that actually it didn't do as bad as it was portrayed.
I've heard that too. Yeah.
In Japan. So what is the real truth?
I don't think it's that it did so bad in Japan. I think the Japanese were nervous that probably with the way the current anime market was in America. Like anime in America tends to be more edgy, and the stuff that tends to be the most popular, I mean, my god, what's the most popular show in the world right now? It's Chainsaw Man. You know what I mean? Like, which, awesome, but I'm just saying, I think American anime fans, by and large, tend to oftentimes go toward the more adult, or the darker, or the edgier, and I think they thought, well, if they dub this show that's essentially a children's ghost story show, it might just sit there like a smelly turd. So they were like, do something to kind of zhuzh it up. Yeah, I'm not convinced it was some big flop in Japan either, and I've seen evidence presented that it really wasn't. So I don't think it's that it was a flop in Japan. I just think they were afraid it would flop in America unless something was done. And boy, was something done. It's a good question though. Yeah, because I did a little looking into that too, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, because there were some statistics that showed, it was doing about as well
It was
as
fine.
any regular
Yeah.
anime would do.
Yeah. I think mainly they just wanted to see if they could make it something other than what it was. Like, we don't feel we can market it as like America has enough domestic properties that are sort of Scooby-Doo-ish. You know what I mean?
I see.
So give them something that's a little edgier or crazy. I don't think they knew how far we would take it. But yeah, that's a good question. Yes. Yes, you.
I guess with the translation from it coming from a children's show to being very explicit, was there pushback with that?
No, but actually, so it's funny. A friend of mine asked me something the other night, and I was like, "That is a great question to which I do not know the answer." And it was this. He was like, "You know, that's one of my favorite shows," but he he also he speaks fluent Japanese, and he used to work in Japan as he used to blog for visual K bands, and he also taught English in Tokyo. And he was like, I gotta know though, have the Japanese seen this? And I was like, God, I hope so. I would imagine, I think, here's the thing. The dub, this is a statistic that I do believe in. Apparently, yes, the original show in Japan did fine. It did fine. The dub apparently has outsold it 10 times.
Yeah. Wow.
So, I think the Japanese were like, Shogunai. Like, we just don't care. Like, yes, they took it and made it into this Lynchian South Park or something, but that's fine because we got a lot of this. And I think it's not a sacred title to them. It's not like we took Evangelion or Cowboy Bebop and made it Cowboy Whorehouse. I mean, I don't know. You know, yeah. I think if something like that, if we, you know, I don't know, chainsaw boobies, like that would have been a problem. But it's Ghost Stories. It just wasn't a huge mega A-list title. It was just, you know, a title. So I think that I would have. I mean, these corporations that run all these, be they in Japan, China, Korea, or America, they're very savvy, and they all talk to each other. And I'm sure the Japanese I would like to think the Japanese have heard it and they think it's hilarious. But because one of the things in my early career that made me feel so good, and I used to, whenever someone tried to come along with some like dub hate, I would always throw this at them. If any of you know the show Full Metal Panic, it kind of, okay, so that was one of my first big lead roles, and the creator of Full Metal Panic told a panel of people once, he said, whenever he shows Full Metal Panic to his friends, be they Japanese, American, or whatever, he shows them the dub. And I was like, thank you. It just made me very happy, because we really took a lot of time with that dub. So I think the Japanese probably thought it was funny. I hope so, but I want confirmation on that at some point. But at the end of the day, we know how much comes down to money, and I'm sure they're very happy with the residuals.
Thank you.
Sure. Next question. Yes. The legend.
What joke are you most proud of from that show?
Oh, that I can repeat in public in 2022. I was just watching the other night. You know what? I can say this at a panel. This isn't even a joke. It was the line delivery, and that's why I can take credit for it. I think Stephen Foster wrote this line, but the way I said it, I felt maybe I'm patting myself on the back too much, but I felt it kind of sold it, and it made it maybe funnier than it was. But Stephen Foster was like, oh, Patton, hold on. He was like writing this on. He was like, okay. And I was like, oh, snap. And he was like, Hajime was like, oh, the music teacher, she's a bitch. And I don't know why I find that so humorous every time. Because usually I laugh at other people. I laugh at Christine Otten's like Ketchero stuff, and I laugh at Monica, and I'm like, oh, Hajime, I'm used to Hajime. I said all that before, but she's a bitch. That just like gets me every time. It's not my favorite joke in the show, but my favorite jokes in the show, I cannot repeat it at panel. Good question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, then. Next question. I say that like you guys don't know how a panel works. So now you ask a question. So yeah, I saw your hand go up. Sorry about the long walk.
What was your first impression upon like working on this project and seeing kind of script you have?
I'll be honest, like I was surprised, and I was a little wary and scandalized, not because I'm prude or anything, but because I was just like, what is ADV gonna do with this? But the more we dove and delved into it, I was like, oh, this is actually really funny. And you want to hear something kind of heartbreaking? I don't like to I was about to say, I don't like to tell a lot of people this, and I'm in front of a panel. Apparently, I do like to tell a lot of people this. This is some inside tea I got about 7 or 8 years ago that just kind of made me want to cry. Apparently, Adult Swim was begging for the show. And their only caveat was, we can have everything else, we cannot have blatant F word. So for every F word, if you could just put a boop, and someone at 80 Films at the time wouldn't do it. They refused. And that's what kept that show off of Adult Swim. And I was like, damn it. That made me, because that would have been 10 times bigger than it was already. It would have been huge. It would have been perfect.
Actually more interesting than the actual F word.
Yeah, sometimes it, the little mystery, yes. So, yeah. Thank you for the question. And then I saw someone's hand go up right after this went out. Yeah, it was you, yes.
Yeah, you mentioned Full Metal Panic. Alright. So you mentioned Full Metal Panic, and I was just wondering, like, which of the Full Metal Panic did you like the most?
So, has anyone seen every Full Metal Panic? Oh, okay, I thought one person was going to raise their hand. Alright. I mean, that's, so, I have discovered that most people's favorite is Fumofu. I think it's because it's the most comedic. My favorite is Invisible Victory, which we recorded, it's the latest one. We recorded that in 2018. And I like that because it was kind of dark, and Kaname and Sosuke finally consummated their relationship after all these years of leading us along, and they literally said the words, I love you. And it's like, oh, it only took 18 years for this to happen. Very satisfying. I like all of them. I would say Invisible Victory is my top, then Fumofu, then Second Raid, and then the original. That's how I really it. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Next question. Why am I talking like this? Okay, here's a rule. If no questions get asked for 15 to 20 seconds, I start naming roller coasters. This is just a thing that happens because I'm a big roller coaster nerd, and I just start literally naming roller coasters. So that's your warning. Yes. He's like, please God, no, please. I'll make something up.
So after Ghost Stories has sort of permeated anime culture and has become this thing, was it sort of like something that would be referenced by your peers in the industry as like, you can't Ghost Stories this dub or something like that?
Literally at a signing 3 weeks ago in Riverside, California, the great KG Tang, he's JoJo. JoJo. No, he's not JoJo. He's Gojo in JJK. That's what I was trying to say. He's Gojo in JJK. His wife comes up to me and she was like, Chris Patton, I hate you. And I was like, what did I do? She goes, no, I'm just really jealous. And I said, why? And she pointed at my Ghost Stories print. She goes, that? And I was like, oh, yeah. She goes, no, you don't understand. Everyone in the industry knows about that show, and they know it will never happen again. And they know that we'll never be able to be a part of something like that. And I'm like, that's right. Your husband may be Gojo, but I was in Ghost Stories. No, I didn't say that. Yeah, no, I've heard it verb before, wouldn't it be so cool if we could Ghost Stories this? Like when a dub company knows that they're polishing a turd, basically, they're like, man, I wish we could Ghost Stories this. And that's from New York to LA, like Houston, Dallas, LA, New York, every studio, yeah, everyone knows about Ghost Stories. And it's like, I was having lunch a couple hours ago with 2 voice actors that are here from LA, and they were like, what do you got going on? I'm like, oh, I'm signing at 6, and then I've got a Ghost Stories account. They're like, oh yeah, you were in Ghost Stories. And I'm like, yeah. They're like, and they started asking me the same questions you guys have been. It's just, it has that literal like legendary status. It's wild.
Very cool, thank you.
Sure. Yes. Yeah, you. I'm fine.
I was making sure.
Yeah. You're good.
So, I know that Ghost Stories can't be made again in this day and age, but if it could, how would it?
How?
Yeah. Like, I know that a lot of the jokes would have to be different because they would be considered really offensive now.
Yeah. It's funny though, I've had so many people tell me in private that they're like, dude, like, And these are people like me who are very, and I promise I'm not trying to get political, I'm making an example. I am very, very textbook leftist, okay? I'm very left, I'm a feminist, I'm all that stuff. I also love horribly politically incorrect humor.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it feels really good to laugh at that stuff. Maybe because like you're laughing at the devil, or like it's just a release to laugh. And it's like, I am not supposed to find that funny. But there's something that, like, I don't know, like how many of you are fans of like George Carlin or Richard Pryor we're talking comedians from way back in the day, like when I was a little kid. But they were masters at taking things that were politically incorrect and making them into erudite, brilliant jokes where you laughed and you didn't feel bad because of the way the joke was couched and presented. There's no way to do that with a dub of a show. If it happened again today, it would be a different animal for sure. But let's say we could get away with all the humor. We couldn't. Let's say we could. The main thing that would, I think what would be fascinating is how someone once proposed, what if you redubbed ghost stories every 5 years? Just so that you could like change all the pop cultural references, because like in that time we have had like how many, like we've had Trump, Me Too, everything that's ever happened with a Kardashian, every scandal, every like Harvey Weinstein, like so many things have happened that would be such great fodder, but like at the end of the day, I think we might all feel like we were going to hell. But would it be worth it for the laughter? No, I don't know. I've seen a couple of like what I call fake woke people online saying that the whole cast of Ghost Stories should be canceled nowadays, and I'm like, shut up. Like worry about real stuff, like the world burning down around you. Sorry, I said I wasn't going to be political. It couldn't happen today. It couldn't. You're right, and I think that's good and bad. It's good and bad that it couldn't happen today. It's like when people say, people have said, well, you couldn't make Blazing Saddles today, and the response that I've heard that is proper is, no, we don't need to. We've made Blazing Saddles already. They did that back in the 70s, and it was horribly racist by poked fun at racism. We did our thing with Ghost Stories where we wanted to offend everyone in the world, including we literally made fun of ourselves. Like, Greg and I literally made fun of each other in the show. It meant nothing. It meant absolutely nothing. And if you listen to Matt and Trey from South Park, like they will straight up tell you that the only reason they do that show is to make people laugh. Like they don't have an agenda. They don't have they have personal, political, socio-political opinions. They don't care. Like
They don't care.
they'll do anything and say anything to get a laugh out of you.
Everything is
Everything's fair game, and that's the approach we took. You could do it again, but it would have to be like with kid gloves on, and all the cultural references would be very different. So I don't know. It's so weird to be living in 2022.
It's an interesting thought.
It is an interesting thought, and it would be an interesting experiment to try another dub like that to see how far you could push the envelope and what you could and couldn't do. It would be really interesting. Yeah. It would be, I don't know. Wow, I'm getting into the philosophical weeds. Sorry. Next question. Yes. Oh wait, hold on. Just because they're new, I'm gonna yeah.
I'm up.
Come on down.
I have to assume that people have proposed drinking games for watching ghost stories.
Yeah.
What's the best one you see?
It's funny. I've had people recently come up to me and tell me there's drinking games for diabolic lovers.
Oh,
Which is like every time he says pancake, drink, or every time that the girl's consent is violated, which is really dark, by the way.
Fly off your ass.
Yeah, you would be dead. Your liver would at least fall out of you, I'm sure. I guess with ghost stories, here I will propose one. You have to commit to watching the whole series, and I say it's a progressive drinking game because you take a shot for every F-bomb, and what happens is, first couple of episodes you're like, I'm not even buzzed, nothing's happening. By about midway through, you're like, I'm tipsy because we're F-bombing a little more. by the 25th and 26th episode, like, you're a goner. Because it's an F-bomb, like, every minute. So maybe that's a drinking game. Also, I think another good one could be every time Monica says Jesus Christ. Maybe you could do that. Yeah. Or, an even better one, every time Leo says, yeah. You know how he like, ends so many of his sentences with yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He's like, yeah, whatever. Jewish boys looking for Hoosies.com. Yeah. And like, you know the reason they did that was because there was always an overhanging flap. So Stephen Foster would be like, Greg, just say yeah. Just say yeah at the end of every day. That's how that happened. And Greg just made it sound so natural. So I think that, yes. I'm going to start proposing those. Thank you. Except I won't, because I don't want to be responsible for anyone's alcohol debt. So, yes. Ben? I have known Ben on social media for like over a decade, and this is my first time actually meeting him at a con. So, legend status, yes. Or to me, anyway, yes.
Although you said you can't make another stories done right now, would there be a show like in the past or even right now you say it's right for doing a ghost stories like to make?
I can name okay, first off, I will say there was one show that came close. And a lot of you probably like this show. It's called Shin Chan. And I think like especially the action bastard segments came kind of close. But almost none of you will know this show. There is one show I could name. It's just one of the worst dubs I've ever been. But it's not because the dub acting is bad, the direction isn't bad, but the show is just a giant turd on its own. But it is the show that got me Full Metal Panic. So, but there was a show called Neo Ranga. Yeah, and it's bad. It's a bad show, and I think if you gave that the ghost stories treatment, it could be hilarious.
Is it like one of those hentais or?
No, it's not a hentai. How would you describe Neo Ranga?
Well, it's funny. If you play like an ADD like DVDs and you play trailers for it, when they showed you the trailer, it looked like horrifying, like it was scary. And then when I actually watched it, it's funny. It's awkward.
Oops. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, not even the same thing.
The do it now things.
Yeah.
So that would be right for Ghost Story, I feel. Shows like that, like they tried to be one thing and they failed at being them. Those are the ones you want to look for. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Of course. What time is it, by the way? I never know.
It's 7:13.
Oh, we got time.
I think you should call the nice lady, the girl from earlier who cosplayed.
Wait, where? Where is she?
With the headband. I think she should have a question.
Oh, come on. Oh my God.
I have a quick question, yeah.
Yes. Yay. Yeah, you look fabulous, by the way.
Thank you.
Of course.
I have a quick question. I know this is more for Montreal, but how did that come about with her like born again Christian, you know?
You know, okay. Oh, hey, what was that? That was the ghost. I'll write you a story. I cannot prove this, but I have a theory. So, I'm going to tell you something that you're going to find maybe a little hard to believe, but I think it helps answer your question. Stephen Foster, the director and writer of Ghost Stories, yes, a giant flamboyant homosexual, a crazy person, wild man, he's also a born-again Christian. The writer of the Ghost Stories is a born-again Christian. Very liberal, and he keeps his views basically to himself. But I think that Monica's character is supposed to be some sort of like riff on him.
Yeah.
I really do.
I think she's my favorite because like I was raised Catholic as well.
I was too. I was an altar boy.
So we just relate on that on so many levels.
Right? Monica grew up Catholic as well.
Yeah.
I think that's the origin of that character. Yeah. And I think Monica and Ketro, like Christina, those are my two favorites.
Yeah.
I love both of them. Yeah. I think that's how it happened though, honestly. Sure. Sorry, Steven. I told on you. No, he's pretty open about it. He's like had to come out of the religious closet. Next question. Yeah, no. So, okay, we got 10. He's gonna start talking about roller coasters. I rode a bunch yesterday. Wait, someone? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, someone back there? Come on up. Ask a question into the mic. It'll be amazing. 28 minutes, plenty of time. Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
I was wondering, first off, are you aware of the Abridged series on YouTube? Do you I'm just asking, do you feel like ghost stories help influence that into like, you know, the culture?
I've heard that before, but let me ask you guys something, because you might know more than I would. Because I've heard people suggest that before. Was there anything abridged before ghost stories?
Surreal was first, yeah.
Okay, so I don't know. I would like to. Here's what I think. I think ghost stories may have popularized abridging. I don't think it invented it, but I do think that without ghost stories, abridged series wouldn't have become as popular as they are. Yeah, good question though. I've wondered that many times. Do you have another one? Yeah.
It's kind of irrelevant question.
There's no such thing until there is.
So, how did the snarky personality of the cat come about? Like, was he originally like that in the Japanese, or was?
I think he was just ominous and spooky in the Japanese. Rob Mungle is a stand-up comic, and his stand-up comedy act is really dirty and filthy and kind of angry. So I think Stephen Foster just asked him to channel his stand-up comedy act into the portrayal of Amanajaku. My cat, by the way, that I miss very much, that's at home right now, he looks a lot like Amanajaku. So it's not his name, but he could pass easily. He's really nice, unlike
I could see something like that happening to me.
Oh,
No
absolutely.
offense, I love cats, but
No, I do too, but I can totally, yeah. I just heard today that apparently when a cat purrs, it's because they're eating ghosts. So, if your cat purrs a lot, your house is haunted, okay? Which means my house is insanely, I need an exorcist or something, so, or a lot of sage. Next question. Yes, in the back. Make the walk down.
What's your favorite experience dubbing, like in all? Like your favorite memory?
Oh man. I have a lot. But I've been doing it a while. You accumulate stories over the years, for sure. I would say there were a lot of moments in Ghost Stories that were memorable and fun, but it's the things that it's the happy and sad accidents that happen. Like Aaron Dismuke falling off his stool while voicing Alphonse, or Sean Schimmel passing out when he was powering up. And I had something similar to that when I was working on a show called Razafon. At the time, I was in a really bad habit of sucking down a Red Bull before my sessions.
That's never good.
No, it's not. And now, anyway, I gave up Red Bull a few years ago, but I'd be running late to a session and I would just power down Red Bull. I was going in for my fifth or sixth Rockafon session, and I was late, and I was sucking down Red Bull, and I run into the studio just in time, and my first cue is a giant loud scream. There was a lot of that. And I was like, oh, of course, here we go, Rockafon. And so they rolled, and I was like, yes, and just as I was doing it, though, I felt bubble guts.
No.
And I'm like, what's going on? And I screamed really loud, and at the end of the scream, it trailed off in a giant monstrous belch.
Please tell me they left that in.
No, but I looked up, and Matt Greenfield, the director, was laughing so hard that he had his head down like this, and the engineer was just looking at me like this, and he goes real calmly, he was like, dude, you peaked the bass. And I was like, you're welcome. So funny story about that. Someone said, you said, did you keep it? Well, that same engineer, many years later, he told me something. So I got into a habit of where I would just belch during sessions after that, because I thought it was funny. In fact, if any of you have played the game Oculus Beats? Yeah. Okay, I'm the lead character, but also Brittany Karbowski cannot belch on cue. So I was her character's stunt belcher. And yes, and I there's a credit for me on IMDb where I'm credited as stunt belch. And I'm like, wow, mom's super proud now. But what I found out many years later from that same engineer, his name is Jason, he was like, Patton, I've never shared something with you, but I think it's time. And I'm like, what? He's like, I may have an F drive that's full of your belches that I've used over the years for demons and monsters. I'm like, what? He's, yeah, I put them through processors, reversed them, put flange, and you've been tons of demons and monsters. I'm like, cool, so you owe me money. But yeah, apparently I'm uncredited all throughout anime as various demons and monsters because of all my belches throughout the years.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
You're welcome.
Gotta put that on your tombstone, yeah, the
Right.
top tier credit.
Like, right, forget Reed or Linhart or Oikawa or Ghost Stories. This man could belch. Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Wow. No, because I don't have any. I will say, it does require that I'm imbibing all the time. Something carbonated. But then I can burp on rhythm. I can burp on cue. I can burp. It's pretty wild. But I wouldn't know. No. Next question. So I wrote for Bolton yesterday. Yes.
Your favorite line from Ghost Stories. Any line, it doesn't be your line.
Alright, caveat. I am saying this as a gay human being, so I can say it. Whatever. I love that exchange in the car between the construction workers. When they're doing the whole your sister. And the one guy's like, yeah, when I was on your sister. And the guy in the back goes, shut up, everyone knows you're gay. I don't know why, but that makes me cry with laughter. I think it's so effing funny. It's out of nowhere, it's unexpected, and it's brilliant, and it makes me so happy. That's my favorite moment in the whole show. That, and when the teacher's doing the lecture about the boy bunnies and the girl bunnies. Gold! Okay, yes. Next question. Yes, way over there in the back. Hi.
So Ghost Stories is now looked back and is really beloved by a lot of folks, but I'm curious to know what were the immediate reactions from people who were not involved once it was out?
That's a really good question. Yeah, so when it first came out, I remember 2 reviews came out in New Type magazine, which was a big deal at the time. There was one that was like raving that it was like the most innovative, incredible, hilarious dub that had ever happened. And there was another one that raked it across the coals and said it was offensive and stupid and it belittled Japanese people and anime and all this stuff and Japanese culture. And honestly, it got shown at a few conventions and it just kind of went nowhere for a while. There was a little bit of online chatter about it, like, well, have you seen this? It was crazy. And that was it. And I don't know what happened. But like, much in the same way that like Haikyuu and Oikawa fandom bloomed over lockdown, something happened with Ghost Stories between 2008 and 2016 or 17. Because I think it was in 2017 when a friend of mine was like, dude, Ghost Stories is on the front page of Reddit. And I'm like, why? And it was because someone had posted this YouTube, like 12-minute, like the best of Ghost Stories clips. And in something had happened. I don't know what. Someone wrote an article about it, or a bunch of memes started coming out. But in a day, it went from having like 250,000 views to 2.1 million. And that, so something about social media, meme culture, and Reddit all kind of had a really crazy orgy and made this soup that was called Ghost Stories is now the Rocky Horror Show of anime, pretty much. You know what I mean? Like, Rocky Horror Picture Show had I make that comparison because it had that trajectory where it opened and it just kind of laid there and it had a little small cult following, and then within like 2-3 years, like millions of people were lining up at midnight to see it all across the country. Similar weird thing with Ghost Stories. I can't explain it, but I'm very grateful for it. It's wild. It's wild. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Next question about ghost stories or anything else. Yes. Don't ask me about math, though.
I'm actually really curious now. What's up with the roller coaster thing?
Oh. That bears some explanation. I'm a giant roller coaster nerd. Like, I'm obsessed with roller coasters, and I have an almost encyclopedic knowledge of them. And I've written about 130. And so the joke I make is when people aren't asking questions rapidly in a panel, I'm like, you have 10 seconds to raise your hand. So I start naming roller coasters. And sometimes I'll name them and give statistics about each one. So you can pretty much, you can name a coaster and I can give you a pretty good list of stats about that coaster. Like I can just go, oh, yes, and then so that's what that's about.
Follow-up question. I just moved to the East Coast last month. What's the best roller coaster in this area?
Oh, 100% Pantheon. Pantheon at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. It just yesterday, I'm sorry Cedar Point people, it eclipsed Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. Steel Vengeance was my #1 roller coaster in the world, but yesterday I rode Pantheon and I think I saw the gods for a second. It was very intense and surreal, and I've ridden many coasters throughout my life, and it takes a lot to really get me. It shook me up. It was wild. It was very good. Yes. By the way, it's designed by Intamin Manufacturing. That reaches the top speed of 73 miles per hour. And a top height of 178 feet. And has 3 launches. Sorry, I'm so sorry. See, this is what happens. This is what happens. Yes.
How many negative G's?
Oh, it felt like 20. I don't know. It felt like I was being, like, there's one part, there's an off-axis airtime hill where it feels like you're being hurtled into, I'm so sorry, oh my god. It felt like we were being thrown into the universe. I was like, what is happening in my life? It was amazing. Yes.
What would you consider the best theme park in the US, in your opinion?
Oh, I'm gonna hurt some feelings, maybe. It's not Disney or Universal. It's Busch Gardens, Williamsburg.
Wow.
It just won the most beautiful theme park in the world. It has insanely good roller coasters, and some theming that's just as good as Disney without all the Disney stuff that goes along with Disney. Yes. And I will leave it at that.
Chris will still like to work for him someday.
Oh, voice-wise, yes. Yes, Disney. Anybody else have a question? No? Go right ahead.
She's not a plant, I swear.
I'll pay you to come here.
So, going back to the dub, how did the character of Keiichiro evolve? Like, he didn't start out too,
challenged.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I would love to ask Christine Otten that question because I'm sure she had something to do with that. She's a very naturally funny person. I think, you know how the dub sort of degrades, it just gets filthier and filthier? I think that was the trajectory he wanted to take everyone on. So my character became more and more of a perv, Monica's got more and more religious, Greg's got more and more stereotypically Jewish, and I think they just wanted to make Ketchero more gradually stupider and stupider, and uttering those monosyllabic bleeps of his. Yeah. God. At least he's not racist. Yeah. Oh God, what a great show. That's my guess. I'm guessing. But I would love to ask Christine about that. Yeah. Next question. So yes.
You mentioned a bit about the reaction from media to Ghost Story. How's that reaction from your peers in the industry?
They loved it. Like I would go to conventions and they were like voice actors in LA were having Ghost Stories watch parties. I would meet people like Talis and Jaffe and he's like Ghost Stories is sick. Kind of like at the time he was like living in a house in LA with like 10 roommates and they were all like just nerds living together doing anime and stuff. He's like my friends and I watch that show like weekly and we're obsessed. And like really he goes, yeah, dude, that's no, they loved it. Our peers in the industry were like they love it. Yeah, I never heard one person say, you shouldn't have done that. No. They were into it. Yes, in the back. In the back, yes. What if I talk like this all the time? I wouldn't work. Yes.
How much did you hear of what everybody else was doing as you were recording?
Yeah, usually you don't, right? You just hear pretty much what you're doing and the people you're interacting with. But we would get Steven to play stuff for us. Like, or he'd be like, you gotta hear what Christina is doing. And I'm like, what is she doing? And he would play me some Ketro stuff and I'm like, oh my God, what? And he's like, listen to what Monica said. Yeah, no, way more than usual. Because we would just kind of, there was, a lighter air about recording that dub than there was with recording a lot of other things. And so when we had time to kill or whatever, Stephen Foster would be like, I'm gonna play you this. And yeah, so I heard quite a bit.
And were you doing the episodes in order?
Yeah, we did do them in order. Yeah, that's unlike film, all anime dubbing is always done in order. Yeah. Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have one? Yes, come on down. So Tempesto, this is a launch coaster as well.
So, in like today's anime culture, I don't think it matters now, but like back then, like around like early 2000s or like 2010s, what do you feel like the argument of subs versus dub was? Like, do you think that mattered or like?
I don't know that it ever mattered. It's very subjective, right? But my feeling about that is severalfold. First of all, if you don't like to watch anime dubbed, don't watch it dubbed. You don't really need to talk about it.
What about you? Where you making your money?
No, it doesn't bother me. And you want to know why it never bothered me? Because I knew something all the fans who want to do crap talk on dubbing didn't know. Dubbing supports the industry. Dubbing makes most of the money. Without anime dubs, the industry would die. And that's been true since the beginning. Even when dubs, like there was a time before I was in the industry where dubs were frankly not very good. They would hire like retired radio announcers and stuff, and like the acting was not great, the writing was not great. But if you want anime to sell, and be huge in America, it's the dubbing that does it. Yes, there are always going to be purists and hardcore people, and not even hardcore people that I want to try it in Japanese, I want to, and I say, do whatever you want, live your life, but dubbing holds the industry up on its back. I mean, anyway, yeah. So, it bothered me at first because people felt the need to talk about it. They would come up to you, knowing who you are and what you do. I only watch in sub. Do you care? And you know what Greg Ayers would always say? He's like, oh, well, when I want to read my anime, I read a manga. And I was like, yes, all right. Because we got told that so many, like especially in the early days, people would wait in autograph lines, and they would come to you and be like, dub actors suck, and they would just leave. And I'm like, I was like, hey, I have to listen to Japanese actors in my headphones all day. Some of them are really bad too. Like, it's universal. Well, it's so irrelevant now because But
The simulcast.
yeah, exactly. But even nowadays, you'll hear people like, well, I only watch my anime in Japanese. Well, good for you. I only take your mom to cheap restaurants. And surprise, I'm gay. I mean, what do they want me to say? It's just so weird. No, yeah, it's a really good question, and you're right, it is irrelevant today, but back then, we just kind of would smile and nod most of the time, but every now and then we'd get a little sassy. But again, the joke is, the thing they don't want to admit or know or hear is that without anime having been dubbed in the first place, it would just, apart from like little culty circles of people who watch it raw, it would never have gotten as big as it became. So, yes. 5? Okay, cool. You're good.
Following up on that question, what do you think of the 4Kids?
Oh.
4Kids what?
No.
Dub.
Of what?
Any of the anime.
I never watched them.
Yu-Gi-Oh.
You never watched Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh or
What is? Oh, well, I mean, I'm in Pokemon.
or One Piece?
No, I never watched their One Piece. I've only ever watched what Funimation did. But I know their reputation. But the thing is, if a dub is bad, I don't really care. It's just, I'm an actor, and I've been acting since I was 9 years old, and as an actor, you like to try to support your fellow artists, and I've seen lots of my friends in awful shows as an actor. I'm a director as well. I'm a theatrical director, and I see lots of plays, for example. I see lots of theater, musical theater, and I've seen lots of awful shows. But I know what every one of those people up there is going through and is trying to do, and there's all sorts of reasons why something can be bad. Whether it's a dub or a theater piece or a film, things are up to a director, things are up to an editor, things are up to writing. So I just try not to go too hard on anyone. And you know what, if 4Kids dubs sucked back in the 90s, well, let's just be grateful it's not the 90s anymore. You know what I mean? That's how I feel about that. But I have heard that the 4Kids One Piece was not great. That's all. There was a lot of talk about that when I first started in the industry. Yes. And I think I can do one more after this.
So I started watching anime back in the bad days when dubs were $5 cheaper on VHS.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, those.
So I have 3 episodes.
I remember watching
13 tapes for Evangelion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, back then obviously the voice pool was a lot smaller, and there were a lot of actors who I'd hear in multiple shows and be like, they sound a lot like, other character they did recently.
Right.
Have you ever been doing a dub and either thought to yourself or had a director tell you, hey, you're sounding a bit like X you just did recently?
So I'm going to tell you a story. A lot of you might know that to this day, I play lots and lots of like 17 to 19-year-old, we'll call them angsty twins, okay? And I have in my career, I've played many. And yes, you have to be very careful that you're differentiating, because how different can one 17 to 19-year-old voice sound from another, right? And you do have to be really careful. So it's a really good question. This is just a funny story. So I want to answer your question seriously and be like, yes, I am very mindful of it, and I've heard myself like, I need to change it up because I don't want to sound like every other young angsty dude I voice, right? But I got this same question at Anime Central back in like 2004. I was still pretty new in the game. I had voiced about 10 or 12 angsty teens at the time, right? And I'm going to tell you something I said at a panel that had about 700 people in it. Oh my god. So, people often ask, have you ever done anything super embarrassing, or do you have any con horror stories? This is one of mine. Someone asked what they said to me was, do you ever worry about getting typecast as a 17-year-old mech pilot? Because I played a lot of those by then. And I was like, kind of. And then I thought I was being all suave and professorial with my answer, and I go, I mean, really, sometimes at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, how many 17-year-old boys can you pull out of your ass? And I said it, and I was like, oh crap. And everyone was just, the laughter went on for like the vice president of ADV Films was laughing so hard he was falling out of his chair. And I was like, well, what I mean is, it was too late. It was done. It was done. But it does bring up a serious question that, yes, my vocal wheelhouse is pretty villains and young guys with issues, right? And so I have to be really careful that they don't all just sound like Chris Patton. And it is something you have to be mindful of. Yeah. And I agree. Sometimes you can just hear someone be like, oh, there's so-and-so doing their so-and-so thing. And you want to try to not get caught up in that, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have time for one more?
That's about it for this one.
Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry. Thank you very much for coming.